We are in many ways an interesting, if you will, third way for building out community fiber, neither a traditional telco incumbent way and not a city or city hall driven municipal activity, but really run as a nonprofit.
Hello, this is the Community Broadband Bits podcast from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm Lisa Gonzalez. Lev Gonick, co-founder and CEO of OneCommunity, joins Chris today. This nonprofit has forged an alternative method to better connectivity that does not involve dependence on distant corporate providers. OneCommunity serves anchor institutions, businesses, schools, and local government in the Northeast Ohio area with a community-minded approach. Last fall, they announced the Big Gig Challenge, a call for gigabit project proposals that will incorporate their network. The awards recently announced include grant funding up to 25% of the project costs. In this interview, Lev discusses the Big Gig Challenge, the OneCommunity model, and how industrial Northeast Ohio came to develop its future-proof resource. We bring you the Community Broadband Bits podcast ad-free each week, but we need your support. Please consider contributing to our work. It's easy. Go to ilsr.org and click on the orange donate button. Every little bit helps. Now here's Chris and Lev Gonick from OneCommunity.
Welcome to another edition of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Chris Mitchell. Today I'm talking with Lev Gonick, the co-founder and CEO of OneCommunity in Northeastern Ohio. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Lev, you and I will be joined together in a panel soon down in Austin, Texas for Broadband Communities in April. I feel like those panels are always a lot of fun, and I think anyone who's listening to this show, if you're enjoying the relationship and the discussion that we have, you should definitely plan to come down and see us in action live. So how do you plan those sorts of things, Lev, when you are putting together a panel like that?
Well, while it appears probably to the audience that these are all extemporaneous and just kind of going by the seat of our pants, as you know, Chris, we spend quite a bit of time in banter and conversation before the event, and the questions that are crafted may come across spontaneous, but many of them, at least the initial ones, are fairly well scripted because we really want to have a conversation rather than just expecting an hour of prepared speeches. And, over the last many years of trying to do this, including at the Broadband Communities Gathering, it's turned into, I think, valuable for the audience, but I think it's equally interesting for the panelists who keep on coming back for more.
Yes, and I just wanted to start the show off that way because, frankly, I think it's a really fun panel discussion that we have, and it's definitely not your average one. So, Lev, for people who aren't aware, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the background of OneCommunity, and we'll dig into the history, but I'm just wondering more, what are the sort of things that OneCommunity does?
Sure. Well, OneCommunity is a nonprofit, a provider of fiber services, including internet services, focused in on Northeast Ohio's broad public benefit ecosystem of hospitals, education, government, museums, libraries. And we've been doing that work in Northeast Ohio as a nonprofit for just over 10 years now. We have about 2,500 route miles and about 2,400 facilities on net. We are in many ways an interesting, if you will, third way for building out community fiber, neither a traditional telco incumbent way and not a city or city hall driven municipal activity, but really run as a nonprofit, and maybe we'll get into that.
Yes, I definitely want to get into that, and I'm curious how it got started, and I believe the first name was One Cleveland, because it really came out of a collaboration with a number of entities in Cleveland. So maybe you can tell us how it all began.
Sure, and you're exactly right. Back in 2004, a group of technologists, CIOs, folks like myself, I had been recruited to Cleveland from the Central Coast of California, and while people always, certainly for the first number of years, asked me whether I had my head checked moving from Monterey Bay to Cleveland. I certainly joined at a really interesting point in time where there was a lot of talent, technology talent, coming from the coast to Cleveland for various reasons, and we got together with a group of sort of civically minded business and economic development leaders, really sort of talking in very broad strokes about the future of Northeast Ohio. And at the time, for your listeners, obviously, that was the definition of the Rust Belt. That was, a community that was hit very, very hard. Not only then, but also, at the ground zero, really, of the foreclosure crisis, which is sort of, 4 years later, when that happened. So really, our question was in very broad strokes. What could the technology community do to contribute to the reimagining and the redevelopment and hopefully the reinvigoration of the region? And one of the initiatives that I had advocated for was actually thinking about designing, architecting, building, operating, and managing a next generation fiber optic network, which would, I at least asserted, allow us to be in the driver's seat in terms of blueprinting our collective future here in the region, in a way that would be analogous to many other sort of historical moments in time when public investment was made or community investment was made in charting roads or ports or waterways and things of that sort.
So let me ask you about the nuts and bolts, because you're a high level person, but you're also a nuts and bolts kind of guy from everything that I've been able to tell. And kind of like we just recently did an interview with Elliot Noss of Ting and
Sure.
Two Cows, and I met you through a lot of the same sort of circuits of people that were really concerned about the open internet and expanding access. So I've gotten to know you better than I know many of the guests on the show. And I'm just curious, OneCommunity is a nonprofit, but what exactly does it do?
Sure. Well, we have grown from One Cleveland, when we were only based in Cleveland, to now touching 24 counties in Northeast Ohio. We, with public support, most of it through the stimulus fund, have built out a very robust next generation network. We now have subscribers to the network, almost all of healthcare in Northeast Ohio, most of education, certainly almost all of higher education. Many of the counties use OneCommunity for their broadband needs, everything up to, and maybe we'll get to this as well, some really exciting multi-gig kinds of network needs that are being deployed here in the region. And we are today self-sufficient and self-reliant on subscriber fees, who make OneCommunity their internet service platform for their needs, not only to the internet but also to their data centers and even their dark fiber needs that they have.
And you've often worked in cooperation with all the other providers in the area, if I remember correctly. I mean, we're not just talking about the usual suspects of the local companies that are willing to work together, but you've also worked with a lot of the biggest companies in the nation, I believe.
Right. I mean, I think what we've managed to do here is, again, I'll come back to this notion of the third way, because we do have a public benefit mission. We have, and yet we aren't kind of, those people in City Hall. We have managed to craft relationships that are informed largely by pragmatics that drive much of the telecommunication industry, and that means, in very practical terms, that we bid for customers using other telecommunication providers' infrastructure. We team with competitors that have them help us with last mile activity when it makes sense for the customer. We actually have what we call Type 2 network services, which in fact means that some of our route miles of fiber are actually on a competitor's lit fiber service, because it's actually ends up being a better cost model for our customers. And yes, in significant number of cases, we're dealing with the top tier telecom providers, national providers, as well as folks who specialize in regional fiber. And so again, I think for those of us who operate networks, while I think we all imagine perhaps in general terms that somehow we might own the network end to end, in practical terms, that's actually not economically viable for most of us. And in fact, unless you're AT&T, which really is singular in the way it approaches its network build, given just how deep the pockets are, everyone else actually operates in a manner consistent with what I've just outlined.
One of the reasons that we picked now to have you on, because I've always wanted to have you on as a guest, is there's a big contest you've just announced the winners for, and I believe it's the Big Gig Challenge. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had a series of really fun announcements at the end of the year, and now just at the beginning of the new year here. We started with an announcement with a grant that we actually received with the city of Cleveland for deploying a 100 gig network in a commercial use. And then we turned around and actually had a reverse grant opportunity where we actually asked some 80 cities that are in our footprint if they would be interested in one community investing in their city in a partnership basis to actually help them build fiber and together use that fiber for whether it was economic development purposes or whether it was their municipal operations or actually trying to help advance an anchor institution's work in that community. So yes. We ran a process through the fall. In many ways, we were inspired by at least what Google managed to pull off when it went national with making its call for expressions of interest and having Google invest. And while we had effectively $1.49 to invest as opposed to Google's money, we did actually get almost 24 cities responding with a letter of intent in the fall, and then we worked through a process with them, including detailed engineering work and economic development and business plans. And literally just earlier this week, we actually announced our 4 winners, which are geographically diverse, and also, I have to say, quite interesting in terms of opportunities for both the communities that are involved as well as OneCommunity's interest in co-investing. And I think it's a really a series of win-wins out there. The cities themselves are thrilled to be joining the national gig fiber work that is clearly being led by yourself and others in the community who are working on trying to extend gig fiber into the municipal space. And at the same time, very practically, very pragmatically, there are economic development zones. There are, which for folks who've perhaps been to Cleveland, one of our most famous landmarks is the West Side Market, which is a great farmers market. It has proven to be a magnet for microbreweries and a whole revitalization of a very tough part of town. And they, as a community, came together and were one of our successful grant recipients to build out fiber right through the West 25th corridor, all the way to one of our anchor institutions, which is the public hospital in the city called Metro Health. So that's just kind of one example, and it includes some of the marquee local brands, including the Great Lakes Brewing Company, which everybody who's listening has to try at least sometime in their life.
Well, we will encourage them to. What were some of the lessons? I mean, I'm curious, working with 24 cities on these kinds of networks, is there anything that surprised you in terms of what motivated the cities to get involved with this challenge?
Well, I'd start by saying, Chris, that we're not generally. I think we don't perceive ourselves as kind of a hotbed of high tech and next generation networks. As a community, I think we very much embrace our industrial and manufacturing past, and so for a lot of the cities, this was kind of, I've heard it from my other mayoral colleagues or other people in the economic development world across the country who are working with networks. And so for a lot of folks, this is the first opportunity to use our dollars, OneCommunity's dollars, as seed for conversations inside their own communities and city halls and regional planning facilities. Even, for example, one of the metro parks, we have a fantastic park system, managed to mobilize conversations on the future of the Emerald Belt that we have here. Even just because they were sort of saying, we have a chance to work with One Community on this kind of an activity set. So I would, to answer your question, I think a lot of what went on in the convening sessions that we had was we actually brought clusters of the prospective participants together, and after they introduced themselves and we kind of reviewed kind of the state of the program, most of the many hours that were spent together were with them talking to each other about very local contextual issues. How do you folks deal with tax increment funding? I think, could you imagine using that source, or public bond financing, or so there were lots of creative conversations going on where the grant itself was, I'm sure, for many folks a desirable endpoint, but the actual journey and the conversations and the engagements between folks, I think, will have much longer term value, which we hope in our next round of Big Gig Challenge we'll see even greater collaboration, which of course is what the network purports to be able to support.
And speaking of your next round, one of the things I'm curious about is if I was the governor of Ohio and I was saying, Lev, you're doing such a great job, how can we help you? What would you say to me?
Well, I mean, I think that it would be wonderful if the governor of Ohio, who has been enormously supportive of Next Generation Networks, he is, as a Republican, one of the only Republican governors that I know, I'll say singularly the only Republican governor that I know, who's actually put his money where his mouth is when it comes to Next Generation Networks. He built out a statewide 100-gig network backbone for public benefit, and he has also collapsed a lot of government contracts into a public network for general service use. So Governor Kasich really gets the IT space. I would say to him, Governor, it's time to actually do what Connecticut is doing. It's time to use the state really as an opportunity to convene and create truly a statewide plan for deploying next generation networks, and using the convening authority of the state to encourage both the incumbent players, the nascent new entrants into the marketplace, and all the other prospects into really delivering next generation network to the seventh largest populous state in the nation.
One of the things I want to make sure we touch on is, one of the things I really like about you, Lev, is that being someone located in the Midwest, as I am as well, we don't get a lot of respect on the coast. People are more likely to laugh about our cities, I think, than take us seriously. But you've developed some real pride in the Cleveland area. And so I'm curious, as someone who's given this a lot of thought and cares deeply about it, what can a city like Cleveland do, given its very real fiscal worries and things like that, to make sure that it's having the connectivity that it needs?
Yeah, I mean, I have thought, written, spoken, and every day I spend time talking and working with the community to try to move from a deficit oriented view of the world to I would call it an asset or surplus view of taking advantage of all the assets that we have, and in particular, where we're at right now. And I just had a posting that was put in the business newspaper, which is Crane's Cleveland, on a strategy for the new county government here to specifically take a look at the role of the leverageable assets that they have to advance next generation broadband and open data, which in my mind actually are really two very important and interrelated activities, especially for county government. In the city's context, interestingly enough, Cleveland has one of the largest city-owned public utilities, Cleveland Public Power. And I have been working to both educate myself and to help educate folks both in the banking community and in city utilities on the opportunity to, again, follow really important precedents that have been set down across the country, and perhaps most notably in terms of headlines by Chattanooga. But obviously there are many, many, many other communities that are leveraging their public utilities. But, a city the size of Cleveland, for that scale really gives us a real need to think a very large challenge in terms of the tens of millions of dollars that will be required to deploy next generation networks. And the city has huge assets like Cleveland Public Power, pole rights, a very skilled labor force of folks who know how to work the poles, and I would sort of say also a really important Midwest work ethic of can-do. And I think it's slow moving, but with a new county government and with continued support, the city of Cleveland and its economic development team and the mayor's office have been supportive. But as everyone who will be listening, and I know you, Chris, city mayors have 101 priority ones they have to attend to, and in Cleveland, truth be told, the Department of Justice findings and the challenges we've had in our public safety community, have consumed large cycles of time, and we're just going to have to wait. Hopefully tonight, as we speak, President Obama will hopefully help elevate our vistas and hopefully the vistas of our mayors to look over the hill as to the art of the possible, and hopefully encourage the cities to start thinking about ways that they can leverage their assets.
I think that makes sense, and they're words of wisdom people should heed. The history of Cleveland, for people who aren't aware, Mayor Tom Johnson, who I believe is responsible for that public utility, there's a great history back there, and I think that if he was with us today, he would certainly be moving ahead in this direction and recognizing that the city has to solve its own problem locally. So thank you so much for coming on the show, telling us something about One Community. And I would like to have you on longer, but I know that we promised not to take your whole day up. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for your interest. And actually, as we've shared when we were off air, I also want to say thanks for everything that you and your organization do.
We have several stories about One Community on muninetworks.org. Be sure to check them out. Send us your ideas for the show. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @CommunityNets. Please take a few moments to donate to ilsr.org to help us continue this valuable service. We want to thank Person for the song Blues Walk, licensed through Creative Commons, and thank you for listening.